It's Cougar Sports Saturday.
That's caught! Touchdown! Stayed inside the boundary and gets in for 6.
Cougar Sports Saturday, a presentation of KSL Sports.
Richie right to the rim, driving score! He would not be denied!
BYU Sports Talk by Cougar fans for Cougar fans. Sponsored by Any Hour Services, Electrical, Plumbing, Heating, and Air. Your hosts are Mitch Harper and Kyle Ireland. On Utah's legacy home of the Cougars, KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM and 1160 AM.
Welcome back into Cougar Sports Saturday, hour number 4 for BYU and Cincinnati. Typically, we hold it down for 3 hours here on Cougar Sports Saturday, but when you've got big football games like this one, BYU and Cincinnati, live here from the Queen City, we got to do it big. Mitch Harper, Kyle Ireland with you. This is a massive game, Kyle, with Big 12 championship game stakes on the line, college football playoff stakes, so much to unpack, and it's a huge game for this BYU team that played great last week.
Yeah, BYU, Mitch, they have to make a statement today. I don't even think winning is enough based off of what we saw on Tuesday and what we talked about earlier today with the College Football Playoff Selection Committee and how they've viewed BYU this season, because one loss to a top 5 team, potentially a top 4 team in the country, borderline elite team in Texas Tech, whose defense was outstanding against BYU a few weeks ago. But, BYU has to show better than they have, earlier on in this season. They did that last week against TCU. I think that, style points were on display against the Horned Frogs a week ago, and they need to be again this week against Cincinnati.
And it's going to be an energized Nippert Stadium crowd. I was here this morning in Cincinnati at Big Noon kickoff, and I will say, Cincinnati fans, nice effort. I like the energy. I like the excitement, but your signs were so just, I've seen it all. Like, oh, BYU sign, okay, check. Oh, 7 wives, check. Like, come on, Cincinnati. Can you give us some originality? Like, I know that the Midwest doesn't typically deal with BYU, and we're going to see more of that, but come on, Cincy fans. Still, I think it's going to be an energized crowd. And I will tell you, Kyle, historic Nippert Stadium, and that's the name, the signage around Nippert Stadium, it's a really cool venue. It's a landlocked stadium. It's within campus. You can walk around the stadium all hours of the day. 24/7, it's accessible for the students to walk through and to class. It's an awesome setting. First time I've ever been here. Second time for this BYU football team. And I bring this up because sometimes these road games can get a little dicey. I think BYU's clearly the better football team, but road environments can be an equalizer. And even Aaron Roderick earlier this week discussed about handling a tough road environment because 2 weeks ago, Kyle, you and I were there in Lubbock. They handled that poorly. This was A-Rod on handling the tough road environment.
Yeah, first of all, they're a good team. That's the big challenge right there. Is just we're playing as a good team. They have good players, good schemes. They're well coached. So that's the first part, is just that they're good. Then secondly, we're on the road, which we didn't handle our last road game very well. Didn't handle crowd noise very well. So we've got to do better with that. And then just it's a long trip. So we've done it before and we've won games on the road in the past, but it's a huge challenge for sure. This is a team that is very good.
Kyle, are you more optimistic that this team is better equipped to handle a tough environment this week than they did 2 weeks ago against Tech?
Yeah, I think so, Mitch. They have to be, right? They have to have learned from that experience, because A-Rod said that they didn't handle that Texas Tech environment well. They used a silent cadence in that game and just had a hard time communicating, dealing with that. I also think that, BYU, we've learned over the years now that this team plays really well at night, and that's been, a calling card for this team. That early morning kick was just, I think that was an under-talked about factor of that Texas Tech game. The fact that they rolled into Lubbock late in the evening, came in around 5 o'clock local time to the team hotel there. BYU, they end up coming out, 2 days early to this game. They're going to be settled in, ready to go. It's an 8 o'clock kick there in Cincinnati, and I just think that everything is more suited for this. There's going to be less of a crowd as far as like the capacity is concerned than there were for that Texas Tech game. And I do think, you and I were talking about this, yesterday, Mitch, just as far as like our show prep was concerned. And when you were talking about Nippert Stadium, the word you used to describe it to me was intimate. I thought that was really interesting because, BYU has one of the largest, stadiums in the West Coast, and they have the biggest one in the Big 12. And so, these home games for BYU have been, really beneficial with having the rock and the crowd there, sellouts and whatnot. And, Cincinnati's going to have a good crowd tonight, but you're talking about, a decent number of fans that are going to be cheering for BYU probably in this one as well, making the trip out there. It seems like there's a decent amount of Royal that has been on display there at Big Noon Kickoff, and also we've seen it from other games this season. BYU continues to travel well, but Cincinnati's going to be ready for this one, Mitch. They're hyped up for having Big Noon Kickoff. They're ready to break this losing streak that they're on. But what do you think as far as the crowd is concerned with that intimate environment?
I think that it's going to be a really energized setting. And I think that's interesting, too, because the Big Noon Kickoff piece, I think, was key for Cincinnati to fire up their fan base. And then, two, night games. We talked about it earlier, but, Cincinnati prides itself, and I didn't know this until this week when reading the game notes for the Bearcats. They call themselves the pioneers of night games in college football. The first ever night game in major college football was here at Nippert Stadium in 1923, and they love their night games. They haven't had a night game in 2 years here at Nippert Stadium. So despite the 2-game losing streak for Cincinnati, you factor in senior day, night game, Big Noon Kickoff. I think those factors energize this Cincinnati crowd to get excited for a game where, in a spot where you would have typically said, oh, they're down and out. Are they going to check out of the rest of the season and just move on with things and get ready for the bowl game that they play in? But I think that they're feeling a little optimistic that maybe they can spring the upset. I will say Cincinnati is still a little guarded about their belief and optimism to get the win, but I think the spot and where it lands and all the kind of extracurriculars give them some hope. For BYU, you got to focus on who you were last week and build off of that, because I thought that performance a week ago against TCU was the most complete game BYU's played this season. To win 44-13 against a solid TCU team, not great. I think TCU, I had higher expectations for them coming into the year than what they've shown, but they hammered that team that's going to be going to the postseason, and it seems like no one nationally wants to give any respect to that performance by BYU except against TCU, except for Provo Dave Portnoy, who keeps banging the drum saying BYU needs to get to the college football playoff, and I think all of Cougar Nation can agree. So it's going to be an awesome setting tonight, and it's kind of surreal, Kyle, to be out here and think this is a conference game. I don't know why it just doesn't compute in my head that BYU and Cincinnati are conference foes. You tell me, oh, BYU, Texas Tech, yeah, that kind of makes sense in my brain. BYU, Iowa State, yeah, that makes sense. I don't know why BYU and Cincinnati just feels a little different to me. Maybe it's because there's not much similarities between Cincinnati and Provo, but still, I think this is going to be a very good football game between two teams that have some really good talent and personnel, and it should make for an exciting night here in the Queen City. Let's take a break. On the other side, you'll hear from BYU tight end Carson Ryan, who looks to follow up his career-high performance from last week tonight here in Cincinnati. It's BYU Cincinnati extended pregame here on Cougar Sports Saturday.